Exposed, 3 sinister true Cornfield horrors that haunted 100s revealed the unexplained. Claire gripped the steering wheel of her aging sedan, her knuckles white against the worn leather as she drove home through the vast, empty expanse of cornfields. The moon hung like a cold eye, illuminating shadows that shifted unnaturally. "Mom, is he watching us?" Tommy asked, his voice reverberating with innocent fear. Claire chuckled nervously, but her heart raced. The stories were just folklore, right? Just the wild imagination of a 7-year-old. But the trees seemed to whisper as she passed, echoing the frantic rustle of the corn, as if they shared secrets too dark to tell. Every night now, the whispering followed them. The first time, it had been an eerie flutter against the car window, a voice calling in the distance, Claire, but she dismissed it, just the wind, she thought. Yet Tommy's tales of the man in the cornfield twisted an unease deep in her gut. "He wants to come out," Tommy had exclaimed before falling silent, wide-eyed, and Claire felt that silence settle like a weight between them. Weeks rolled by, and whispers in the diner morphed into frantic conversations about unexplained disappearances. Young folks were vanishing, and Maplewood, once a safe haven, seemed to pulse with dread. Claire's heartbeat accelerated whenever a customer hinted about the fields and the things that lurked within. Eyes wide with panic, she spoke to Sheriff Daniels, hoping for reassurance. His dismissive tone sent chills through her. "Just keep an eye on your kid. The town is fine, Claire," he had said, as if babies still existed wrapped in denim and innocence despite the rising paranoia. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Claire's stomach sank deeper when she started receiving calls from an untraceable number. The voice on the other end, a low, malevolent whisper, sometimes sounded disturbingly familiar. Tommy's playing in the field, it taunted before cutting into static. Each night brought more fear, more unknown. With little other support, she turned to Henry, the farmer next door, while desperately hoping he might share some wisdom. He smiled kindly, but her heart quickened as a chill crawled up her spine at the mention of old sacrifices, of ground soaked in something sinister beneath the moonlit corn. As the days grew darker, Claire's heart raced at her growing doubts. Each comforting word seemed laced with unease, each shadow felt alive in the field surrounding them. On a stormy night, lightning pulsed through the sky as Claire drove home, dread clawing at her throat. In the flickering light, shadows twisted and stretched, making her believe someone or something was lurking just out of view. Her phone buzzed, the screen lit up with a message from Tommy. "Mom, he's in the cornfield. We have to run." The hairs on her neck stood on end as she glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness stared back. But something crackled to life in the corners of her vision, the shadows calling, weaving a story of fear she couldn't fully comprehend. In that heartbeat of realization, the line between safety and danger blurred, and Claire realized there was no turning back. The truth was on the verge of unraveling, and terror lay just beyond the horizon, feeding on the fears that haunted Maplewood. Adrenaline surged through Claire's veins as she slammed her foot on the gas. The engine's roar shattered the silence, drowning out the rhythmic whispering that wrapped around the car like a mist. "Mom, what's wrong?" Tommy's voice trembled, fear palpable in the confined space. She could barely look at him but desperately tried to remain calm, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Nothing, honey. Just a little." She glanced at the cornfields, the stalks dancing chaotically in the wind, almost as if alive. "Just a little wind." Just then, the phone buzzed again, another incoming text from Tommy's device. "Mom, he's here." Panic clawed up her throat. How? How could this be happening? "Tommy, where are you?" she shouted, gripping the steering wheel tighter. As if in response, The headlights caught movement. A figure darted between the rows of corn, 1 second visible, the next swallowed by darkness. Heart hammering, Claire felt her breath grow shallow. The stories were coming to life. Each tale, each myth, woven into the very fabric of this cursed land. "Mom!" Tommy whimpered. "He's watching us. I can see him." "No!" Claire hissed, trying to silence her racing thoughts. The moonlight flickered over a tall shadow at the edge of the field. His shape was elongated, contorted, as if shaped by the frenzied whispers in the wind. What if it wasn't just a figment of Tommy's imagination? What if he was doing as the warnings foretold, slipping between realms, finding joy in his games of fear? "Drive faster, Mom!" Tommy insisted, the terror in his voice sending ice through her veins. But an inexplicable force held her in place, tugging the wheel toward the field. The headlights illuminated a grotesque smile that stretched across the face of the figure, a smile that seemed to twist the very darkness around it, revealing teeth sharp and gleaming under the silvery moon. Claire's fingers went numb, paralyzed by a primal fear. She couldn't look away. The shadows were alive, shifting closer, their whispers growing louder, a chant, drawing her in. "Claire," a voice called, smooth and inviting. A voice she knew far too well. "Turn around." She yelled, but she couldn't tear her gaze from the figure. It leaned closer, whispering secrets of the cornfield, of children that had been lost and hidden away. A sickening realization crushed her. Tommy wasn't just seeing things. This entity was real, and it was calling to them. The sedan's tires skidded to a halt. Claire focused, desperation clawing at her throat. "Tommy, get down. We need to get out of here." She fumbled for the door, but the locks refused to budge. The figure moved with a predatory grace, emerging from the corn, each step sending tendrils of dread up her spine. Tommy, still in his seat, pressed against the glass, wide-eyed, mouth moving silently as he witnessed the horror unfold. With a horrifying lurch, the door swung open. An invisible force yanked it wide, almost welcoming them into the darkness beyond. "Come out to play," the figure beckoned, its voice echoing through the night. The air turned icy as terror filled the cabin with suffocating dread. Claire's instincts screamed to run, but the icy grip of that figure's gaze transfixed her. It beckoned her and Tommy toward the cornfield, a sickly sweet promise of fate. Tommy's small voice broke the tension. "Mom, it won't let us go." As realization crashed in waves, a chilling laughter echoed through the night. Maybe it was already too late. Something shifted behind her, a rustling that didn't feel like corn bowing to wind. Claire turned just as something cold brushed past her leg, and she screamed. The darkness rushed in, suffocating and cruel. But in the split second before oblivion, a thought glimmered. What if she wasn't supposed to rescue him, but to save herself? Would she have the strength to choose? The laughter faded into the night, and she felt the ground beneath shift as the shadows reached for her. It was a decision that would shatter everything, and she was about to uncover what waited for them, waiting for her choice to be made. What would happen if she dared cross that threshold? The shadows enveloped Claire, a thick darkness swallowing her scream. Time stood still, a cruel moment stretched into eternity. Her heart pounded fiercely in her chest, drowning out the whispers flickering through the cornfield, demanding, pleading, welcoming. "Mom!" Tommy's voice shattered the silence, pulling her back from the brink. She turned to him, desperately seeking to anchor her resolve in his innocent eyes. The terror in his face mirrored her own, and she could feel the cold press of panic strangling her breath. Suddenly, breaking free from the paralysis, Claire yanked the steering wheel. She had to do something. With blinding speed, she thumbed the locks, managing to wrench the door open just as the figure lurked closer, its laughter echoing across the emptiness. "Run, Tommy! Run!" she screamed, shoving him ahead of her. The boy stumbled into the night, the cornfield towering over him like a wall of nightmares. But as Claire bolted after him, dread clawed at her ankles, pulling her back toward the malevolent figure. The air crackled, heavy with raw energy, like the moment before a storm. She could feel the figure's gaze, cold and penetrating, filled with a hunger that made her stomach churn. "Mom, please." Tommy's voice cracked, his small frame shivering under the moonlight. He turned, eyes wide, pleading. "Don't leave me." Claire's feet hesitated. A rush of instinct fought against the very fabric of her sanity, a primal urge to shield him from whatever was looming. But was it too late? Was he already marked, ensnared in an invisible web of horror? In the fleeting seconds, she felt a phantom touch run up her spine, gliding like ice. Footsteps echoed behind her, stealthy and low, the shadows twisting amid the corn. Panic soared anew, swift and suffocating. Straining against the horror, Claire thrust herself forward, her body fueled by pure survival instinct. "Over here." She gripped the boy's arm, yanking him toward the safety of the car, the metal glinting like a beacon in the dark. But nothing defied the pull of the field, and the whispers grew vicious, clashing against her resolve. "Join us." Claire's breath turned shallow as another figure emerged from the corn, tall and skeletal, blocking their path. The air felt thick, stinging in her lungs, making each breath a challenge. From the corner of her eye, a flicker of motion, a glimpse of light, an illusion of hope, or a cruel trick. "Mom! We're not safe," Tommy urged, tugging at her hand, desperately pulling her back. "No. We need to leave now." She flung the car door open, shoving Tommy inside. Adrenaline surged, but dread gnawed deeper. The darkness was relentless, secrets begging to be revealed, shadows alive in a way that tickled the edges of her sanity. Just as she slammed the door shut and turned to the wheel, an agonizing realization struck. A low, guttural growl reverberated through the silence, a promise of retribution. The field stirred ominously, corn stalks swaying in a pattern that mirrored the beckoning movements of something alive, something that was no longer just watching. "Mom!" Tommy's voice trembled, barely a whisper. "They want you." The car engine sputtered, refusing to roar to life, rattling her nerves like a death knell. As the creature edged closer, Claire's heart chilled. It was towering now, blocking their escape. And then, in that heart-stopping moment, she saw a glimpse of what lay beyond the shadows. Eyes like burning coals, radiant against the dark, and a knowing smile that twisted reality. It feasted on fear, thriving on the very essence of existence. "Stay down," Claire hissed, her voice barely a breath. She turned the keys again. Dead silence. But it was more than fear keeping her trapped. Was this figure a reflection of her own buried nightmares? Could it truly be the darkness responding to her despair? With a final, ear-piercing scream, the figure lunged. Adrenaline surged, desperate to fight back, but the ground quaked beneath her choice. Her hands shook as she slammed down on the horn. The echo pierced the night, mingling with another chilling laughter that echoed back from the depths of the field. The truth was unraveling, and Claire was standing at the edge of a choice. But what lay in the shadows, waiting? As her resolve teetered, a chilling flicker of something dark danced in her mind. The whispers grew more insistent, clawing for her attention. What if this was all part of the game? What if the darkness had already made its decision? And would she be willing to pay the price? The engine coughed violently, sputtering like drowning prey. Claire's fingers danced frantically over the keys, her breath quickening with each failed attempt to start the car. The shadows felt closer now, thick and suffocating, their breath hot against the back of her neck. The guttural growl turned into a twisted blend of laughter, a sick symphony that pierced the night air. "Mom!" Tommy shrieked, his voice cracking like glass. He shrank away from the window, his big blue eyes wide with terror. The shadows beyond slithered, darting with cruel speed. "Do something." "I'm trying, baby. Just hold on." Claire's voice trembled, each word heavy with dread. With one final desperate twist of the key, the engine roared to life, a sound that felt like a breathing miracle amidst the phantoms lurking outside. "Go! Go!" Tommy cried, his small hands gripping the seat, pushing himself back into the upholstery as she slammed the gas pedal. The tires screeched against the gravel as the car lunged forward, the world exploding into a motion blur of ghostly corn, twisted stalks clawing at the air like skeletal fingers. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, but it didn't drown out the creeping fear behind her. Shadows flanked them on both sides, closing in like a noose tightening around a neck. "We're going to get out of this," she told Tommy, but the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. The field seemed endless, a living labyrinth designed to trap them. The whispers evolved, now forming words she could almost decipher. "Come join us, that's not real," Tommy shouted, as if that could silence the dread. She glanced at him, heart aching at the innocence still shining through his terror. "Don't listen to them," she barked, fighting the despair clawing at her insides, and then she caught sight of it, the figure. Tall, twisted, its limbs moving with an otherworldly grace, gliding in and out of the moonlight. The burning gaze pierced through the darkness, locking onto her. A sinister smile flickered, revealing teeth that glinted like daggers. "Faster, Mom." Tommy's voice broke her trance. She pushed the pedal down harder, praying it would get them away. But the dark presence was relentless, chasing them like a vengeful spirit. The road ahead twisted, and suddenly, the path forked. Panic struck her like a hammer, each direction promised danger. The whispers swirled as if they were alive, taunting, beckoning. She had to choose. Left. Tommy screamed, his voice tightening with urgency. Right. The shadows seemed to insist, filling her mind with visions of despair. What was she supposed to do? In that moment, a shock of clarity hit her. "No!" she shouted in defiance, straightening her shoulders. "I decide." With a swift turn, she veered left, wood slapping against metal as the car jolted over the uneven terrain. The whispers became a cacophony, screaming in fury, clawing at her sanity. No escape. No escape. She could feel the darkness at her heels, wrapping around the car like a suffocating blanket. Leaves and branches whipped frantically against the glass. "Mom!" Tommy cried out, his voice fading, swallowed by the chaos. "It's getting closer." The ground fell away as they raced through the field, and suddenly, a wall of the corn loomed before them, a barrier, impenetrable and solid. There was no way around it. "Claire!" The voice in her head shifted, something darker crawling through. "Let it take you, embrace it, shut up." She yelled back to the shadows, tears streaming as doubt seeped in. Hands shaking, she pressed the gas harder, feeling the powerful engine straining against the obstacle. This can't be it. This can't be how it ends, but just as she closed her eyes in focus, a bright flash ignited above them, a desperate spark of light cutting through the terror. Claire's heart quickened, and she felt the pull of hope rush back in. Was it an illusion? Or a real chance? As the headlights flickered, revealing something beyond the corn, something unimaginable, Tommy screamed, "Mom, look out!" The horizon of the night split open as the darkness surged forward, a wave threatening to swallow them whole. In that climactic moment, would Claire be brave enough to face what lay ahead, or would the shadows finally claim their prize? The bright flash flickered one last time before dying, plunging the car into near-complete darkness. Claire's heart sank as the shadows surged like torrents, swallowing hope and light. The whispers circled in her head, rising to a chaotic crescendo. Join us, Mom, we have to go." Tommy screamed, yanking at his seatbelt, eyes wide with fear. "I know," she yelled, panic setting in like a vice around her chest. She slammed the gear into drive, and as the car hesitated for a split second, darkness crashed into them with a furious roar. The engine sputtered as if agonizing over the decision to engage again. "Come on," Claire said fiercely, praying. "Don't fail me now." As the engine coughed back to life, she jerked on the wheel, veering off the path into the cornfield, the car shaking as the wheels skidded over rough ground. Stalks of corn whipped against the sturdy frame, laughter echoing around them, swirling in taunts through the unseen beings that lived in the darkness. Then she saw it again, a glimpse of that tall figure, moving with unnatural ease among the swaying stalks, its grin stretching wider with each movement. It was as if it feasted on their fear, drawing energy and strength from every heartbeat. Claire pressed her foot down harder on the gas, the tires screaming against the rough soil, pushing them faster into the corn maze. "Look, Mom! Look!" Tommy gasped, pointing out the window. She risked a glance and felt bile rise as she saw more figures emerging from the corner of her eye, flitting between the corn like phantoms. Their motions were fluid, their smiles utterly wrong, filled with sharp, glinting teeth. "Keep your eyes forward," she shouted, locking her gaze straight ahead. "Just keep looking forward." The car jolted over a rut, causing Tommy to yelp in surprise. By some miracle, they were still moving, but the whispers had escalated into a disorienting roar. "Turn back. You shouldn't be here." The sound was maddening, drowning everything in its furious hurry. Suddenly, she spotted a dim light through the maze. A small glimmer promising hope. "That way!" she shouted, and with a swift yank of the steering wheel, she headed toward it. But the sounds behind them erupted into a cacophony, angered voices howling, "You cannot escape us." The light grew closer, bleeding through the husks, illuminating a clearing ahead. Claire could almost feel it. Freedom? Or another illusion? "Mom! What if it's a trap?" Tommy's voice trembled, small and fragile amidst the chaos. "Then we'll face it together," she promised, but didn't he even believe her own words? Panic was turning into desperation. The figure was on them, gliding closer, too fast, its smile wide and hungry. In the clearing, an abandoned truck sat silently, rusted and decayed, half buried under a blanket of dust and cobwebs. Hope flickered as she aimed for the vehicle, their last chance. "Mom, the shadows!" Tommy yelled, voice breaking. The darkness surged, swallowing the engine's roar. Claire felt her heart thud painfully in her chest as she threw the gearshift into park and leaped from the car, pulling Tommy with her. They stumbled in unison, breathless, tearing toward the truck. Just as they reached the rusted door, it swung open on creaking hinges, and a chilling breeze cascaded from within, freezing them in their tracks. The light from the field faded behind them. "Claire!" The night seemed to whisper, seductive and hushed. "Let go, no!" she screamed, dragging Tommy back toward the truck, but shadows snaked around their minds, turning them, their resolve unraveling. "We have to go in." Inside the truck loomed an echo of whispers, dark promises and sweet lies curling around their senses. But as she took a step closer, a new feeling flickered, something cold, wet, and heavy dropped from the roof of the cab, pooling at their feet. Dark and glistening, it spread rapidly across the ground, and Claire's stomach twisted as she recognized it, thick and viscous blood. "Mom, no!" Tommy cried, eyes wide with terror. The laughter returned, overwhelming, throaty and mocking, seeping through the air like a blanket of frost. Just when they thought they were safe, the shadows surged forward again, and in their depths, a new horror emerged, something much worse than they ever imagined. Was it finally the end? Or the beginning of something even darker? As Claire turned to take her son's hand, the shadows stretched wide, their next move evident and looming, what waited in the darkness beyond the truck? And could they ever truly escape? The air was thick with dread, horrifying promises brushing against Claire's skin like ghostly fingers. "We need to get in," she shouted, her voice barely cutting through the cacophony of whispers that seemed to claw at her sanity. Tommy stumbled backward, his eyes darting between the shadowy truck and the darkness advancing like a tide at their heels. "But, Mom!" Panic twisted his small features as he looked up at her. "What if something is in there? What if, trust me?" she replied, not fully convinced herself but knowing they had no choice. Claire plunged forward, dragging him with her. The moment they stepped inside the truck, a gust of icy air enveloped them, and the whispers intensified, cascading down the metal walls like a waterfall. "Join us, join us, join us!" The interior felt like a forgotten tomb, dim and musty with the stench of rotten wood and despair. A single light flickered weakly above them. Its feeble glow illuminated scattered debris and rusty tools, a pitiful relic of a world abandoned long ago. But what caught Claire's attention was the rear of the truck, where old tarps hung loosely like shrouded specters under the flickering light. "Stay close," Claire said, scanning for exits as dread gnawed at her insides. Tommy clung to her hand, tension radiating between them. "Mom, I don't like this." "Neither do I," she whispered, dread pooling like ice in her veins. Then something shifted in the darkness beyond the cab, an unmistakable shuffling. It came from directly behind the tarps. Claire's heart raced as she stepped back, her instincts screaming. "What's back there?" "Mom, let us go." "We can't stay." Tommy insisted, tugging at her sleeve, but the shadows whispered louder, promising to reveal their secrets. With a fierce resolve born from desperation, Claire tightened her grip on Tommy's hand, moving to peel back the tarp. She hesitated, breath hitching as the whispers intensified, eager in their invitation. A part of her felt drawn to the darkness, curious about what lurked just out of sight. "Mom." Tommy's voice cracked, further rooting her in her decision. "Just a peek," she muttered, pulling the fabric back slowly. The dim glow flickered and caught on something bright, something slimy and red. A gruesome realization struck her as she recoiled, horror crashing over her like a wave. Body parts, cold and lifeless, lay strewn in grotesque disarray, faces forever twisted in silent screams. It was like a macabre tapestry woven from nightmares. A single hand, severed at the wrist, reached toward her, insisting despite the absence of life in its fingers. "You shouldn't have come here," it seemed to plead, the shadows whispering in agreement. "No. No." Tommy shrieked, covering his eyes. Claire stumbled back, the blood pooling by her feet, still warm and writhing, as if alive. "We have to go. Now," she shouted, dragging her son down the narrow passageway of the truck. But as they reached the front, the door slammed shut before them, sealing their fate, trapping them inside with the horrors left behind. The whispers became frantic, an uproar of chaos, as if the very air was alive with unrest. "You cannot escape, you belong to us now." Suddenly, the headlights flared to life outside the truck, casting long shadows over the cornfield. Claire's heart skipped as she saw silhouettes gathered, their features obscured by the night, eyes glowing with malevolence. The whispering grew louder, overwhelming her senses, drowning logic in a sea of terror. "Mom!" Tommy screamed, pointing. "They're coming." Desperation clawed at Claire's throat. With no way out, she scrabbled for the window beside her. It wouldn't budge. "Hold tight," she warned, pulling out a tool from the scattered junk, a rusted wrench, hope barely flickering inside her. "Mom! What are you going to do?" "I'll break it," she yelled, panic and determination coursing through her veins. As she swung the wrench against the window, a deafening crash reverberated through the truck, reverberating over the furious whispers. The glass shattered, sending shards flying into the night, but at that moment of hope, the shadows surged, breaking through the gaping hole like fingers reaching into the light. "You are ours," they howled. Claire froze, fear seeping into her bones as she realized they were not alone anymore. What sins awaited beyond the veil of darkness, and would they dare to face the hell that now loomed ever closer? The shadows writhed, reaching for Claire and Tommy with a hunger she could feel deep in her bones. Her heart raced, pounding against her chest like a desperate prisoner clamoring for freedom. The whispers swirled around them, a cacophony of sinister laughter and eternal cries, as if every soul lost within that darkness begged for release. "We can't stay here," Claire screamed over the din, hoisting the wrench like a weapon. In this painted abyss of despair, her instincts took over. She knew charging straight ahead was their only hope, even as nightmarish figures loomed just beyond the shattered window. "Look!" Tommy cried, pointing toward a gap between the shadows, a narrow escape trailing toward the backward edge of the truck. "We can get out through there." Adrenaline surged through Claire as she swung the wrench at the shadowy tendrils reaching for them. The cold ether stung her skin like venom, and she could feel the presence of something watching, something waiting. "This way!" she shouted, unwilling to let terror steal her choices. She darted toward the tiny opening with Tommy held tightly in her grip, pushing through the weight of the nightmares around them. As she squeezed through, the sensation of something brushing against her back sent chills racing down her spine. Whatever it was, it wanted them badly. They stumbled into a forgotten alcove, the truck's rear vent barely disrupting the turmoil of rancid air inside. Shadows flickered, and vague outlines of bodies whispered behind them. Everything about that place felt wrong. Claire backed away, instinctively shielding Tommy with her body. "Mom," his voice trembled, and Claire turned back to reassure him, but her heart sank. There, lurking in the shadows, she spotted a figure emerging, tattered clothes hanging from its gaunt frame, eyes hollow and skin gray. It was an echo of terror, a human shape twisted by the dark magic of the cornfield. The whispers grew urgent, spitting out half-formed words that clawed at Claire's sanity. "Come closer, join us, no!" she shouted defiantly, eyes locked on the wretched figure as it staggered forward, mouth twisting into a smile that never quite reached its eyes. Panic threatened to seize her, but she forced herself to breathe, to act. "We need to find a way out. Mom! It wants us!" Tommy's voice rose higher, blending with the banshee shrieks of the other shadows. With the wrench clenched tightly in her fist, Claire turned sharply, scanning the darkness for another way out. Each second felt drawn out, the whispers curling around her like snakes eager to squeeze the life from her. Suddenly, she noticed a breach in the metal frame above a long-forgotten service hatch that looked barely attached. "Up there, Tommy! Climb!" Tommy hesitated, looking back at the approaching horror. "What if it gets us? Trust me," she urged, heart racing, the shadows converging with relentless menace. If they were to escape, they had to banish fear. "Go, go!" Claire pushed him toward the hatch, every movement fueled by their urgency to escape. As he scrambled up, she remained vigilant, wrench raised and ready. The shadows lunged, the entity screaming in desperation for them to stay. With all her strength, Claire surged toward the hatch, breathless and frantic. They had to get out. The frigid air outside beckoned, but behind her, she could feel the shadows pressing in, hungry and relentless. "Mom!" Tommy cried, pulling at her arm, his eyes wide with terror. In that fleeting moment, a choice loomed before her: risk it all and leap into the unknown, or stay and face the darkness creeping ever closer. With a wild, fierce cry, Claire launched herself upward, clutching Tommy's hand as they both tumbled out of the truck and into the night. But the moment they hit the ground, the whispers dissolved into silence, replaced by the haunting rustle of corn stalks swaying in the wind. They were out, but at what cost? Turning back, Claire's gut twisted as she saw the truck flickering like a dying flame, its shadows calling out softly to her, tauntingly inviting. A sickening realization flooded her mind. Whatever dark fate awaited them in this cursed cornfield hadn't disappeared, but rather, it had only just begun to awaken. What unseen force had they unleashed? As they ran deeper into the cornfield, the air felt heavy with death, and Claire shivered at the thought that there was no true escape from what lay hidden just out of sight. They sprinted through the corn, its leaves scratching at their skin like skeletal fingers reaching out in the dark. The pale moonlight barely illuminated their path, casting eerie shadows that danced and twisted, hiding horrors just out of reach. Claire's heart thundered, each beat echoing the terror that threatened to swallow them whole. "Mom, we have to stop!" Tommy gasped, his breath heaving in a way that broke Claire's heart. The innocence in his voice contrasted with the horrors they had just escaped, the deep dread creeping back into her chest. But she couldn't stop. "Not now. No. We can't. Keep moving," she urged, glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see the figures spilling from the truck in relentless pursuit. But the night was quiet, too quiet, save for the rustling corn, a whisper growing louder with each passing moment. "What if they come for us?" Tommy whimpered, his voice fragile and filled with dread. What if? Claire snapped, forcing the thought down. We can't think about that now. She gripped his hand tighter, urging him forward even when she felt like she might collapse at any second. They needed an escape, a haven, something that would shield them from the malevolence that lurked just beyond their vision. The cornfield twisted into a labyrinth, unyielding and dark. Memories of the stories she'd heard as a child flooded back, tales of those who entered the fields but never found their way out, whispers of lost souls echoing through the rows. Were they becoming another pair of lost whispers? Suddenly, a shriek shattered her thoughts. It cut through the night like a knife, raw and agonized. Claire froze, her breath snagging in her throat. Did you hear that? She asked, fear threading its way into her voice. Tommy nodded, eyes wide and frightened. The sound was followed by a deep, resonant laughter, a mocking sound that sent shivers skittering down Claire's spine. The laughter seemed to float above the corn, echoing from all around them. The very earth beneath her feet felt alive, thrumming with a pulse of its own as if the field itself was aware. Mom, please! Tommy cried, tugging on her arm. We have to hide. She scanned their surroundings. Ahead, a too narrow path led to a clump of thick corn, barely offering cover. But it was better than standing there exposed. Okay, let us go. They dashed toward the corn, pulling themselves into the tightly bound stalks. Claire pressed her back against the rough stems, closing her eyes for a brief moment, trying to calm her racing heart. She needed to think, to gather her instinct and focus on survival. But the laughter returned, louder this time, vibrating through her bones. It was childlike yet twisted, almost inviting, as if beckoning them deeper into the darkness. Tommy, listen. Claire whispered, her voice trembling. We need to stay quiet. Just breathe. The air grew heavier, their breaths echoing too loud in the stillness. Claire's heart raced, imagining the dilapidated figures threading their way through the rows, allured by her heartbeat. Then the whispers came again, closer, join us, join us. Claire's knuckles whitened as she clutched Tommy's hand. The specters of the field were drawing near, their voices dripping with dark promises. Tommy trembled beside her, eyes darting nervously, begging for reassurance. Before she could respond, the rustling of corn grew frantic, and shadows slipped between the rows. They weren't alone. Something was coming for them. Claire's mind raced. They had to find a way out. But what if the way out was the one thing they dreaded most? Suddenly, an eerie light shimmered through the stalks, illuminating a figure at the far edge of the field. It stood tall and still, too pale against the dark backdrop, but its features were indiscernible. Mom, Tommy's voice choked on confusion. Who is that? Stay close. She hissed, instinctively pushing him behind her as they held their breath. In that moment, Claire realized the shadows were not just pursuing them, they were guiding them to something far worse, something waiting at the edge of the darkness. What was that figure? And was it friend or foe? As the light flickered, revealing more haunting shapes dancing behind the corn, Claire's fear twisted into a desperate question: what did the shadows want from them? And more chillingly, what had they truly unleashed? A low humming filled the air, vibrating through the corn like a warning. The figure, now closer, emitted a pale glow, illuminating its silhouette against the night. Claire squinted, trying to make sense of what she saw. It was tall, impossibly thin, with elongated limbs that hinted at a grotesque human shape. Mom. Tommy's voice trembled, pulling Claire's attention back to him. She noticed his eyes were wide, reflecting the pulsating light. The warmth of her earlier determination began to wane, slowly replaced by the chill of creeping dread. Don't look at it, Tommy. Just stay behind me. Claire whispered fiercely, rooted in the idea that she had to protect him, no matter what price she might pay. The eerie light flickered off the figure's face, or what could barely be considered a face. Hollow eyes gazed out into the dark, and where a mouth should have been was only a gaping void, swallowing the light. Claire's heart raced. This wasn't just a person, it was something else, something beyond understanding. The whispers grew louder. Join us, they seemed to come from everywhere, echoing all around the field, echoing inside Claire's mind. She could feel the shadows coiling around them, brushing against her like the hands of the lost beckoning her to come to them. "Mom! I don't like this. Please." Tommy whimpered, his grip tightening on her hand, fingertips digging into her skin. "I know, baby. I know," she soothed, her voice trembling, struggling through the fear gripping her heart. "We just need to be quiet. We have to get out of here." Yet, the growing whispers seemed to morph into pockets of frantic laughter and gasps of joy, a stark contrast to her son's distress. The figure remained still, yet somehow that stillness felt alive, watching, waiting. Claire's instincts screamed at her to run, to escape while they still could, but she needed a plan. Glancing to the right, she noticed a narrow opening where the corn grew denser. If they could make it there without attracting attention, but before she could suggest it, the figure turned its head in a slow, deliberate motion, as if it were a marionette pulled by invisible strings. Its hollow eyes locked onto her, a smirk stretching across its empty mouth. Claire felt a surge of panic. "We need to move. Now." They bolted from their hiding spot, racing toward the denser stalks, the whispers rising to a fevered pitch around them. Join us. The shadows flared and danced, taunting them, almost pulling at their heels. Suddenly, a shriek cut through the noise, slicing through the chaos. It echoed through the cornfield, sending waves of sheer horror crashing into Claire's senses. There was no mistaking it now, something was wrong. Something else was out here with them, something far worse than what they had already encountered. "Mom, what is happening?" Tommy cried, tears streaming down his cheeks. Claire glanced back, and what she saw pulled the breath from her lungs. Figures more than one, shapes slithered through the corn with supernatural speed. They were hemmed in, surrounded by twisted versions of sights she'd only stumbled upon in nightmares. "Keep running," she shouted hoarsely. But the stalks were closing in, the path ahead narrowing, the darkness suffocating. They raced onward, pushing through the thick corn, every rustle around them feeling like a warning bell. Then, just as they thought a break might come, the figures coalesced, blocking their path with a sadistic glee that sent chills racing down Claire's spine. The mocking laughter rose again, drowning out their fear, echoing ceaselessly, urging them to turn back. In her frantic search for an escape, Claire recalled a faint story her grandmother had told her about the field and those who dwelled within it. Once you saw them, there was no going back. The realization struck her hard. Were they already lost? Suddenly, the laughter faded. It was replaced by an unsettling stillness that gripped the air. The figures drew closer, insidious in their approach, whispering promises that wrapped around Claire's mind, sweet and horrific all at once. "Tommy, listen to me," Claire whispered urgently, "we have to find a way out. No matter what, don't look away from me." She saw then, at the edge of what remained of their escape, another flicker of strange light. Hope. Or another trap. But deep down, Claire could feel the shadows pulling her in, tightening their grip. Would they continue running, or would they follow the light? Time was running out. Claire's heart raced as the darkness pressed in on them, the shadows writhing with an insatiable hunger. The laughter that had filled the air turned into a deafening silence, leaving only the pounding of her pulse echoing in her ears. The figures loomed, twisted and grotesque, their movements predatory and fluid, but Claire's determination became a shield. "Don't look, Tommy. Hold on to me." She tightened her grip on her son's hand and sprinted toward an unending wall of corn, the rustling leaves whipping against her skin like striking vipers. The brightness grew more intense, a twinkling beacon urging her forward. Was it a mirage? Desperation clouded her thoughts, but she couldn't give in now. With each frantic step, she vowed she wouldn't be another victim to the horrors creeping through these cursed fields. With a surge of adrenaline, they pushed into the thickest part of the corn patch. The stalks were so dense they could barely see anything beyond a few feet. Claire heard whispers coiling around her, dull echoes wrapped in temptation, join us, join us." The sound sent ice ripping through her veins, but she forced her legs to keep moving, urging Tommy to follow her lead. "Mom! It's all around us. We can't keep running." His voice broke, raw with panic. Claire could feel her own resolve begin to crack. What would happen if they continued deeper? But even as she entertained the thought, a strange flicker of hope broke through. The light ahead shimmered like a glow on the horizon, something almost tangible in the heavy air. "Just a little closer, just hold on." She pulled him along, steering them toward that light that promised salvation. Each step fueled by fear and love, each step threading through a tapestry of whispered hate that desperately tried to drag them back. Suddenly, the shadows surged, flickering like flames. "You're not meant to escape," the chorus murmured, sending chills dancing across her skin. The figures crept closer, an army of dark specters with warped faces and shimmering eyes. They were nearly upon them when Claire caught a breath of fresh air. An opening. "Tommy! This way!" Claire lunged for the gap in the corn, dodging the until now ghostly figures. Together, they breasted the threshold, stumbling into a clearing. What awaited them was astounding: a strange old farmhouse, long forsaken and draped in moonlight, the glow illuminating its aged, cracked walls. "Is it safe?" Tommy asked, dragging in breathy gasps. Claire turned, panting heavily, and saw the figures stop at the edge of the clearing, shifting uneasily, the laughter fading into an ominous silence. "I don't know," Claire whispered, her heart racing, "but we have to find cover." She grasped Tommy's hand and urged him toward the battered farmhouse. The door creaked open as if inviting them in, but a primal fear held her back. What lay inside? There was an insanity dancing on the edges of her sanity, yet the shadows seemed to hold their breath, watching from the darkness, waiting for them to make a mistake. "Mom!" Tommy's soft voice pulled her back. She glanced down, his wide, terrified eyes echoed the same anxious thoughts coursing through her. With a firm nod, Claire steeled herself. "We've faced worse. We need to see if we can use this place to hide." They crossed the threshold into the damp, musty air of the farmhouse. Claire's heart sank at the state of decay biting at her nostrils. As she stepped into the dimly lit interior, beams of moonlight sliced through dusty windows, revealing evidence that someone had indeed called this place home. Cracked portraits hung crookedly on the cobweb-riddled walls, time lost within their aging frames. "Mom, do you think they can follow us in here?" Tommy breathed, worry pouring through his fragile voice. She didn't answer. With every ounce of caution, Claire crept further into the house, knowing the darkness hung back just outside, eavesdropping on their whispers while waiting on the command to ravage. They needed to find a place to hide, deep enough to escape those who lurked in the night. Finally, they stumbled upon a staircase leading to a dusty attic, bathed in a faint, flickering light. It felt like destiny had led them here. "Upstairs. Quick!" Claire guided Tommy up the steps, urgency pressing on their heels. As they reached the attic door, Claire pushed it open, revealing an old space cluttered with remnants of forgotten lives. A small, moth-eaten rug lay in one corner, surrounded by boxes draped in a veil of dust. "This will be our hiding spot," she whispered, desperate to keep the sense of hope alive. "Will we be safe here?" Tommy's fear reflected deep within her heart. Claire knelt down, looking directly into his eyes, her own fear tempered with fierce love. "Yes, we will, but we have to stay quiet. Just breathe and keep close. No matter what, I won't let anything get you." Outside, darkness swirled, murmurs cresting like frigid waves. Claire's heart surged as she recalled the tales of those who had succumbed to the shadowy terror of the corn. No, she couldn't allow that to be their fate. Determined, she gestured to Tommy. Together they settled in the corner, crouching beneath the small window, breathing softly as if their very lives depended on it because they did. Hours felt like years as they waited, the shadows outside whispering, their breath a soft surge against the old wood frame. "Mom." Tommy's voice quavered in the heavy silence. "Will they find us?" Her heart ached with unbearable weight, but Claire held on to hope even as dread coiled around her chest. No. Not if we stay quiet. She wrapped her arms around him, shielding him from the suffocating sense of inevitability. And then, with the hour growing late, there came a scream, raw and agonized, a sound that clawed into the night, echoing from deep within the cornfields. Claire's blood turned to ice. The shadows answered, churned, and began to writhe around the farmhouse like a whirlpool, seeking, searching. They were searching for their next lost whispers. But within the darkness of her soul, Claire knew one thing: she would not become one of them. For Tommy, she would fight. With unyielding resolve wrapped tightly around her heart, she swore to protect him, whatever that cost her. "Stay low, honey." No matter what, Claire whispered softly, as shadows gradually crawled nearer, the whispers rising like an unsettling tide in the dark. The air turned electric. This was the moment where the truth would reveal itself. The ancient battle for their souls loomed ahead, too intense to ignore. And perhaps, just perhaps, tonight she would learn if love was strong enough to break through the darkness. In that moment, as terror threatened to engulf them, she prepared for the fight of her life. The shadows were coming, but they wouldn't take her son. Not if she had a say. It was time to reclaim what they had lost. She glanced into the deeper shadows lingering just beyond the window, her determination rekindled in the face of despair. "Let us show them," Claire murmured, "we're not afraid." And then she went silent, for the true battle was just about to begin, painted against the dusky backdrop of night. But whether they emerged victorious or as lost whispers of the corn, that would only be known when the dawn broke, leading the way for light or further entrapment in more shadows that would be left to time and fate. But for now, Claire clung to one last spark of hope, gripping Tommy's hand tight, as tightly as a mother could, ready to turn the tide against whatever lurked in those fields. And for her son and all the others lost, she was ready to fight. Now, if you've enjoyed this intense journey, you need to subscribe to this channel immediately so you don't miss out on the next exclusive story that's coming your way. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes all the difference in getting this content out there. Don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this hair-raising conclusion. Share your thoughts, we want to hear from you, and I challenge you to instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Only true fans understand the power of support to keep the stories alive. Let us show that love.